Greetings and welcome to another School of Criticism discussion, this time psychoanalytical, another 1930s School of Criticism that we apply to all sorts of art. But it really applies with literature, but it's tough because we're not psychiatrists or psychologists, either way, probably psychologists. Now, it comes out of Sigmund Freud. We're all familiar with Sigmund Freud, the German psychiatrist, came up with all sorts of things. The most common that relates to literature is the one that he took from literature, the Oedipal complex. He took it from the play Oedipus Rex, for which the main character kills his father, marries his mother. It's a twist. It's not like he literally knew this. Okay, but Freud says we all want to do it. And so if there is an Oedipal character, if there is a boy who is having issues, right, then a lot of times a psychoanalytical approach will, peg them with the Oedipus complex and see how that drives the character's decision-making process. And that's the analysis, right? Of course, the person doing the criticism doesn't have to be right, but it's a new way of looking at it, a new way of evaluating it, and it produces interesting results. Not everybody has to agree with them. Now, so Freud in literature, obviously, he's looking at characters. He's looking at their id, their ego, and their superego. So, the id is sort of like their libido. I always make a joke with my friend that he's all id. If there is something fun to do, regardless of the consequences, he's in, right? He doesn't care. There are people who are really conservative. They're really conscious about the judgments of people, or subconsciously about the judgments of people, and then there's the ego, which is kind of this middle ground. And so some of the questions that would go for a criticism on this would be things like, obviously, the Oedipal complex. Also, are there repressed elements to the characters? Chrysanthemums, right? You have that agrarian hardship sort of setting. You have this woman who is physically and emotionally distanced from her husband. Along comes the tinker, right? He is asking her all sorts of questions, and he's kind of a pester because he's a tinker and he's a salesman, right? This sort of a thing. But as she begins to loosen up, right, some of her repressed feelings begin to emerge, and she begins to advance as a character, right? Almost as a human. The end is very ambiguous, right? She definitely changes her clothes. And psychoanalytically, that all makes sense, right? That's all questions that we should be evaluating. Why does this character change? How do we know she changes? And what is that change psychologically? Again, we're not psychologists, but we can evaluate it through these lenses and come out of it with a different perspective of what happened, why it happened, and then the choices that the author made. And hopefully more respect for the author. So that's a brief section of or overview of psychoanalysis criticism, school of psychoanalytic criticism from the 1930s on. And again, you're not always going to use it, but as you can see from some of what we've talked about, we always use a little bit of a lot of these. So have fun out there.